Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his massive warship and looked at the small blue planet on his screen. Earth hung in space like a tiny marble, peaceful and quiet. He had been studying this world for months now. The humans who lived there seemed weak and helpless. Their ships were old and slow. Their weapons looked like toys compared to his mighty fleet. For 3 long years, the Corvani Empire had been asking the humans to leave Earth. The planet sat right in the middle of important trade routes that the Empire needed. Every time they asked, the humans said no. They sent their diplomat Catherine Blake to talk, but she always refused to give up their world. Vextar did not understand why such a weak race would dare to refuse the mighty Corvani Empire. His people had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had the biggest and strongest military in the galaxy. No one had ever been able to stand against them for long. These humans should have been begging for mercy by now. Today was the day for the final meeting. Blake was coming aboard his flagship with her small team. Vextar smiled as he thought about how scared she must be. Her tiny ship looked like an insect next to his giant dreadnought. He could crush it with one blast from his main guns. The human ship docked in his hangar bay. Blake walked out with only 2 other people. One was Captain Lucas Rivera, a human soldier who looked calm and ready. The other was a young assistant who carried a briefcase. Vextar expected them to shake with fear when they saw his mighty ship, but they seemed perfectly normal. Blake entered the meeting room where Vextar waited with his top officers. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. She wore simple clothes and carried no weapons. Everything about her screamed weakness to the proud admiral. The meeting began like all the others. Blake spoke about peace and friendship. She offered the Corvani many things: exclusive trade deals, sharing of technology, even some of the other worlds that humans had settled. Each offer was better than the last, but Vextar turned them all down. He wanted Earth and nothing else would do. As the hours passed, Vextar grew more and more angry. How dare these weak humans waste his time with their pathetic offers? Did they not understand that the Corvani Empire took what it wanted? There was no bargaining with power like his. Blake tried one more time to make peace. She leaned forward and spoke very quietly. Her voice had a strange sadness in it that made Vextar pause for a moment. She said that humanity had worked very hard to avoid war. She said the Corvani did not understand what they were asking for. Those words made Vextar laugh out loud. What could these weak humans possibly do to the mighty Corvani fleet? His officers laughed too. They had seen the human ships, old metal buckets that could barely fly in a straight line. The humans had no real weapons, no strong shields, no fast engines. Vextar stood up from his chair and gave Blake the final choice. She had 72 hours to evacuate Earth completely. Every human had to leave their homeworld forever. If they refused, the Corvani Empire would take the planet by force. He would destroy every human ship and bomb every human city until nothing was left. Blake closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them again, they looked very sad. She stood up slowly and gathered her papers. Her voice was so quiet that everyone had to lean in to hear her. She said that if war was what the Corvani wanted, then war was what they would get. But she asked them to remember that humanity had tried to prevent this. As Blake walked to the door, she turned back one last time. She looked directly at Vextar and spoke words that would haunt him later. She said that when the fighting was over, he should remember that the humans had tried to spare the Corvani from what was coming. Then she walked away with her small team. Vextar watched their tiny ship fly away from his massive fleet. He felt proud and strong. Soon he would be the admiral who conquered Earth and brought glory to the Empire. The Emperor would give him medals and honors. His name would be remembered forever as the one who defeated the last free humans. His officers were already making plans for the invasion. Commander Zalex talked about which cities to bomb first. Fleet Captain Morvan discussed how to divide up the human colonies after the war. Science Officer Kegelan calculated how long it would take to completely destroy all human resistance. None of them worried about losing the war. How could they lose against such a weak enemy? The humans had shown no signs of hidden strength in all their years of contact. Their technology was decades behind Corvani science. Their military was tiny. Compared to the Empire's vast fleets, Vextar ordered his fleet to begin moving toward Earth. 200 of the finest ships in the galaxy would crush the human homeworld in a matter of days. He expected the humans to surrender as soon as they saw his armada approaching. Most races gave up when they realized they could not win. As the hours passed, reports came in from across human space. Human colonies had gone strangely quiet. Corvani spy stations near human worlds had stopped sending messages. Vextar was not worried. The humans were probably just running away in fear. Soon there would be no more human resistance anywhere in the galaxy. The 72-hour deadline came and went. No message came from Earth saying the humans would surrender. No evacuation ships left the human homeworld. Instead, there was only silence from the blue planet that had caused so much trouble for the Empire. Vextar smiled as he gave the order to attack. The war against humanity had officially begun. He had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake in Corvani history. He had no idea that the gentle diplomat who had tried so hard to make peace was about to become his worst nightmare. He had no idea that humanity had been hiding a terrible secret for decades. The Corvani fleet moved toward Earth like a dark cloud of death. Behind them, they left empty space where human outposts used to send regular signals. Ahead of them waited a small blue world that seemed helpless and alone. Vextar could not wait to claim his prize and show the galaxy what happened to those who defied the Empire. But in the depths of space, things were already beginning to change. Ships that had looked like harmless mining vessels were shedding their fake outer hulls. Weapons that had been hidden for years were powering up for the first time. And on Earth, President Angela Martinez was about to give an order that would reshape the entire galaxy forever. Catherine Blake sat in the small meeting room deep under the city of Geneva on Earth. Her hands shook slightly as she reported the failure of her mission to the Global Defense Council. Around the table sat the most powerful leaders of humanity, and their faces were grim as they listened to her words. President Angela Martinez listened without saying a word. She was a strong woman who had led humanity through many peaceful years. Now she faced the hardest decision any leader could make. She had hoped this day would never come, but the Corvani had forced her hand. General Jack Patterson had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. He was the head of the Terra Defense Force, and he knew secrets that most humans had never even dreamed of. His job had been to prepare for a war that everyone hoped would never happen. Now that war was finally here. When Blake finished her report, the room fell silent. Everyone knew what came next. Martinez looked around the table at each of her advisors. They all nodded back at her. There was no choice left. Humanity would have to reveal the truth about what they really were. Martinez stood up and walked to a special panel on the wall. She placed her hand on a scanner that had never been used before. Red lights flashed as the most secret computers in human space came online. Protocols that had been sleeping for decades suddenly woke up and began sending orders across the galaxy. Far away in the asteroid belt, mining ships that had been working for years suddenly stopped digging for rocks. Their outer hulls began to split open like flower petals. Inside each fake mining ship was a sleek warship, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Yuki Tanaka watched from her hidden command center as humanity's true fleet emerged from its long sleep. On a secret base hidden inside Jupiter's Great Red Spot, Dr. Rebecca Foster activated weapons that had only existed in theory until now. The Phoenix Project had been her life's work. For 20 years, she had built devices that could tear apart the very fabric of space itself. Now those terrible weapons were finally ready to be used. Across human space, ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers and research vessels began to change. Their fake equipment fell away to reveal advanced weapons and armor. Space stations that had pretended to be simple trading posts opened hidden weapon bays, filled with missiles that could destroy entire fleets. The transformation was happening everywhere at once. Near Mars, what had looked like old satellite dishes were actually the most powerful sensors ever built. They could see enemy ships from light years away and track every movement they made. On the moon, launch silos that had been sealed for decades opened up and began loading missiles. Meanwhile, Admiral Vextar was leading his proud fleet toward Earth. He had no idea that invisible eyes were watching every ship in his armada. Human sensors were counting his weapons and measuring his shields. Computers were calculating exactly how to destroy each vessel in the most efficient way possible. The Corvani fleet was huge and impressive. 200 ships moved through space like a cloud of metal death. At the center was Vextar's flagship, a massive dreadnought that could crack open planets. Around it flew smaller warships, each one powerful enough to conquer an entire star system. Vextar felt very proud as he looked at his mighty armada. His officers were already planning victory celebrations. Commander Zalex had picked out the best human cities to use as examples. Fleet Captain Morven was choosing which human colonies would make good slave camps. They all expected the war to be over in days. But back on Earth, things were moving that the Corvani could never have imagined. In underground bunkers, human soldiers were putting on armor that made them faster and stronger than any alien warrior. Colonel Sarah Murphy led her troops through final preparations, checking weapons that could punch through any known defense. The most amazing part was how quickly everything changed. For decades, humans had looked weak and peaceful to the rest of the galaxy. Their ships were slow, their weapons were simple, and their military seemed small. No one had ever suspected that it was all a carefully planned lie. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for this war since the day they first met another intelligent species. They had seen how the galaxy worked. Big empires conquered small worlds, and the strong crushed the weak. Humans decided they would never be weak, but they would pretend to be until someone forced them to fight. Every human colony had secret weapons hidden underneath normal buildings. Every human trade ship carried missiles disguised as cargo containers. Every human diplomat was also a spy, watching and learning about alien military technology. The whole human race had been acting like sheep while building the tools of wolves. Dr. Foster checked her most dangerous creation one last time. The quantum disruption field could make enemy shields useless by changing the laws of physics around them. The antimatter lance arrays could punch holes through any armor ever made. The temporal distortion generators could make time itself move differently for human and alien ships. As the Corvani fleet got closer to Earth, strange things began to happen around them. Ships that had been following them for days suddenly vanished without a trace. Communication signals started getting jammed by sources they could not find. Some of the younger Corvani officers began to feel nervous, but their commanders told them not to worry. Captain Lucas Rivera was no longer just a diplomatic escort. He now commanded the battleship Retribution's Edge, one of the most powerful warships ever built by human hands. His crew was ready for battle, and they all knew exactly what they had to do. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. The 72 hours were almost up. Soon the Corvani would attack, and the galaxy would learn the truth about humanity. President Martinez made one final announcement to her people. She told them that they had tried to avoid this war, but now they had no choice but to fight. She promised that when it was over, the galaxy would be a safer place for everyone. All across human space, the last pieces of the Great Deception were falling into place. Cargo ships were becoming destroyers. Mining stations were becoming fortresses. Peaceful colonies were becoming military bases. The transformation was complete, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they really were. Vextar had expected to find a few desperate human ships waiting to die bravely near Earth. Instead, his sensors showed nothing but empty space and normal civilian traffic. He smiled, thinking the humans were too scared to even try to fight. He had no idea that he was flying into the most sophisticated military trap ever created. The deadline passed and war officially began. The Corvani fleet moved toward Earth like hungry predators approaching helpless prey. But they were wrong about who was the predator and who was the prey. Very soon, Admiral Vextar would learn that humanity had been showing mercy all along, and mercy was about to end. Admiral Vextar felt confused as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. His sensors showed him exactly what he had expected to see. A few small human ships moving slowly between planets. Some civilian traffic around Earth and Mars. And nothing that looked like a real military force. The human homeworld hung in space like a blue jewel, beautiful and peaceful. There were no massive defense stations around it, no fleets of warships guarding the approaches, no signs that the humans were ready to fight back. Vextar smiled as he realized the humans had given up without even trying to resist. His officers were pleased but not surprised. Commander Xylex had told him that most weak races simply ran away when they saw the full might of the Corvani Empire. Fleet Captain Morven was already calculating how long it would take to land troops on every human world and establish. Control Vextar ordered his fleet to form attack positions and begin the slow approach to Earth. 200 warships moved through space in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready to destroy anything that dared to oppose them. The Admiral expected to receive a surrender message from the humans at any moment. As the Corvani fleet passed the giant planet Jupiter, Science Officer Kedulon noticed something strange. The radiation coming from the gas giant seemed to flicker and change in ways that made no sense. When he reported this to his superiors, they told him not to worry about natural space phenomena. The fleet continued toward Earth, moving past the asteroid belt where human mining ships had been working for decades. Everything looked normal and peaceful. The mining ships kept digging for rocks and minerals just like they always had. None of the Corvani suspected that these innocent workers were about to become their worst nightmare. The first sign of trouble came when 12 Corvani destroyers in the advance guard simply vanished. One second they were flying in formation toward Earth, and the next second they were gone. No explosions, no debris floating in space, no distress calls. They had just stopped existing. Vextar stared at his tactical display in shock. 12 powerful warships had disappeared without a trace. His communications officer tried desperately to contact the missing vessels, but there was no response. It was like they had never been there at all. Before the Admiral could figure out what had happened, space around his fleet erupted into chaos. The innocent mining ships in the asteroid belt suddenly split open like deadly flowers. Inside each one was a sleek human warship armed with weapons that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. At the same time, huge weapon platforms revealed themselves among the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. They had been hiding there for years, disguised as research stations and communication relays. Now they opened fire with beams of energy that could cut through Corvani armor, like it was made of paper. The civilian ships near Earth suddenly dropped their fake hulls to show massive battleships underneath. The human homeworld was not defenseless at all. It was protected by the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Vextar realized with growing horror that he had flown his fleet into a carefully planned trap. Captain Lucas Rivera now stood on the bridge of the battleship Retribution's Edge. No longer the quiet diplomatic escort, but a battle-hardened commander ready for war. He opened a communication channel to the Corvani flagship and spoke words that would be remembered. Throughout galactic history, Rivera's voice was calm and professional as he broadcast his message to every enemy ship. He identified himself as an officer of the Terran Defense Force and gave the Corvani one last chance to surrender. He promised that prisoners would be treated fairly according to human military law. Vextar responded with rage and disbelief. He screamed orders at his fleet to attack these imposter humans with everything they had. How dare they pretend to be strong when everyone knew they were weak? This had to be some kind of trick using stolen alien technology. The Corvani weapons opened fire first, filling space with deadly energy beams and explosive missiles. These were the same weapons that had conquered 100 worlds and destroyed countless enemy fleets. They should have torn through human defenses like a hot knife through butter. Instead, the human ships barely seemed to notice the attack. Their shields absorbed the energy beams without even flickering. The missiles exploded harmlessly against armor that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Nothing the Corvani threw at them made any difference at all. Then the humans began to fire back, and the Corvani learned what real weapons looked like. Beams of pure antimatter lanced out from human ships, cutting through Corvani armor like it was made of soft cheese. The mighty dreadnought Iron Fist, pride of the Corvani fleet, was sliced completely in half by a single shot. Other human weapons were even more terrifying. Some Corvani ships found their shields simply stopped working when quantum disruption fields hit them. Others discovered that time itself moved differently around them, making them sitting ducks for human gunners. A few unlucky vessels were hit by temporal distortion beams and aged 1,000 years in a few seconds. The battle was not even close to fair. The Corvani had brought primitive weapons to fight an enemy that had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe. Every shot from a human ship destroyed or disabled a Corvani vessel. Every return shot from the aliens did absolutely nothing to slow down the human advance. Vextar watched in growing terror as his proud fleet was torn apart around him. Ships that had served the Empire for decades were being destroyed faster than he could count them. His bridge crew worked frantically to find some weakness in the human defenses, but there was nothing they could do. As the slaughter continued, the terrible truth began to sink into Vextar's mind. The humans had never been weak. They had been hiding their true strength all along. Every peaceful meeting, every trade negotiation, every diplomatic contact had been humanity choosing not to reveal what they really were. The Admiral remembered Catherine Blake's words from their final meeting. She had tried to warn him about what would happen if he forced humanity to fight. She had begged him to reconsider, not because humans were weak, but because they were too strong. She had been trying to save his people from destruction. The battle lasted for 6 terrible hours. When it finally ended, 3/4 of the Corvani fleet was either destroyed or drifting helplessly in space with dead engines. The survivors found themselves surrounded by human ships that moved like hunting wolves among the wreckage. Vextar's own flagship had been carefully disabled rather than destroyed. Human soldiers in powered armor boarded his ship and took control of the bridge. They were polite and professional as they arrested him and his officers. They even provided medical care for the wounded Corvani crew members. As Vextar sat in his command chair under guard, he stared at the main screen where human ships moved through the debris of his once mighty fleet. These were not the weak, peaceful creatures he had expected to conquer. These were apex predators who had been pretending to be prey for decades. The news of the disaster would soon reach the Corvani Empire and shock the entire galaxy. The humans had revealed their true nature at last, and it was more terrifying than anyone had ever imagined. The question now was whether the Empire would be smart enough to make peace, or foolish enough to send even more ships to their doom. The news of Admiral Vextar's defeat reached the Corvani homeworld 3 days later, and Emperor Dalthan could not believe what he was hearing. His messenger trembled as he delivered the impossible report. The Third Fleet had been completely destroyed by the weak humans who should have surrendered without a fight. Dalthan had ruled the Corvani Empire for 40 years, and no enemy had ever defeated his forces so completely. The humans were supposed to be a minor annoyance, not a serious military threat. How could a race with such primitive technology destroy 200 of his finest warships? The Emperor called for his greatest military leader, Supreme Admiral Korthas, a legendary warrior who had never lost a single battle in 30 years of service. Korthas was old and wise, with scars from a dozen different wars covering his proud face. If anyone could crush these upstart humans, it would be him. Dalthan ordered Korthas to assemble the Grand Fleet, the largest military force in Corvani history. 10,000 ships would sail to human space and end this rebellion once and for all. The Emperor's own personal dreadnought, Eternal Dominion, would lead the armada to show the galaxy that no one defied the Empire. But as the Grand Fleet gathered at the Empire's main naval base, disturbing reports began coming in from across Corvani space. Human ships had appeared in a dozen different star systems at the same time, striking with surgical precision at military targets while carefully avoiding civilian areas. Supply convoys that had been traveling the same safe routes for decades simply vanished without sending any distress signals. Communication relays that connected the far-flung provinces of the Empire went dark one by one. Corvani patrol fleets found themselves fighting invisible enemies that struck from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Admiral Yuki Tanaka commanded the human counteroffensive from her flagship, hidden deep in interstellar space. Her fleet of stealth ships had been waiting in the darkness for decades, ready for exactly this kind of war. Now they moved like ghosts through Corvani territory, hitting the enemy where they least expected it. The Battle of Kepler Station showed the galaxy what human military technology could really do. The Corvani had built a massive fortress there to guard one of their most important trade routes. It was supposed to be impossible to attack because of all the defensive weapons and patrol ships protecting it. Tanaka's ships appeared inside the enemy formation without any warning at all. The Corvani sensors had detected nothing until human weapons began firing from point-blank range. Stealth technology that bent light and radar around the ships made them completely invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. The fortress and its defending fleet were destroyed in less than an hour. When other Corvani ships arrived to investigate, they found only empty space where one of their strongest military bases used to be. The humans had vanished again, leaving no trace of how they had appeared or where they had gone. Dr. Rebecca Foster's advanced weapons proved themselves in battle after battle. The quantum disruption fields could make enemy shields useless by changing the basic laws of physics around them. Temporal distortion generators slowed down Corvani ships until they barely moved while human vessels attacked them at normal speed. The antimatter lance arrays were the most terrifying weapons of all. They fired beams of pure destructive energy that could punch through any armor the Empire had ever built. A single shot could destroy a battleship or cut a space station in half. Nothing in the Corvani arsenal could stop them. Colonel Sarah Murphy led the ground operations when human forces liberated occupied worlds. Her soldiers wore powered armor that made them faster and stronger than any Corvani warrior. Their weapons could penetrate any known defense, but they were careful to only target enemy military forces. The liberation of Proxima Colony became a model for human military operations. The Corvani had occupied the world for 5 years, using the human civilians as forced labor in their mining operations. Murphy's forces landed at night and struck with perfect precision. In 6 hours, every Corvani military installation on the planet was destroyed. Every enemy soldier was either captured or killed. The civilian population was freed without a single human colonist being harmed in the fighting. It was a masterpiece of military planning and execution. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated itself over and over. Human forces appeared without warning, struck with overwhelming power, and disappeared before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The Corvani military, which had seemed so mighty just weeks before, found itself helpless against an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Supreme Admiral Corthaz studied the reports with growing concern. He had fought many different alien races in his long career, but none of them had shown this level of technological superiority. The humans were not just stronger than expected, they were operating on a completely different level of warfare. The worst part was how carefully the humans planned each attack. They never struck civilian targets or caused unnecessary destruction. Every operation was designed to achieve maximum military impact while minimizing collateral damage. It was as if they were following some kind of moral code even in the middle of total war. Emperor Dal then received reports of defeat after defeat, and his confidence began to crumble. The Grand Fleet was ready to sail, but what good would numbers do against an enemy that could appear and disappear at will? How could traditional warfare work against foes who had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe? Within just 3 weeks of fighting, the Corvani Empire was retreating on every front. Worlds that had been under their control for decades were suddenly free. Trade routes that had made them rich were cut off by invisible human raiders. Military bases that had anchored their power were smoking ruins. The other alien powers in the galaxy watched the war with growing alarm. If the mighty Corvani Empire could be defeated so easily, what chance did any of them have against these suddenly revealed human forces? Diplomatic messages began flowing between alien capitals as everyone tried to figure out what to do. Some alien leaders began to wonder how long humanity had possessed such advanced technology. Had they been hiding their true strength for decades while other races made plans based on false assumptions? How many wars might have been avoided if everyone had known what the humans were really capable of? Back on Earth, President Martinez watched the reports of victory after victory with mixed feelings. She was proud of her military forces and grateful that they were protecting humanity so well, but she also felt sad that it had come to this. She had hoped the galaxy could learn to live in peace without anyone having to demonstrate their power. The momentum of the war was clearly on humanity's side, but Martinez knew that the real test was still coming. Emperor Dalvan would never give up while he still had ships to fight with. The final battle would be at the Corvani homeworld itself, and it would determine whether the galaxy learned to respect peace or continued down the path of endless conflict. Supreme Admiral Corthaz prepared his Grand Fleet for what he knew would be the last battle of his career. 10,000 ships represented the final hope of the Corvani Empire. If they failed, his people would have to accept whatever terms the humans offered. He just hoped that mercy would be part of those terms. The final battle of the war took place in orbit around Corvana Prime, the beautiful homeworld of the Corvani Empire. Supreme Admiral Corthaz positioned his Grand Fleet between the human forces and the planet where billions of his people lived. He expected the humans to attack like every other conqueror in galactic history, with overwhelming firepower aimed at the civilian population. Instead, President Angela Martinez herself arrived aboard the command ship New Geneva, accompanied by the full human diplomatic corps. The massive vessel appeared peacefully in the middle of the Corvani formation, its weapons powered down and its shields lowered. It was a gesture that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Corthaz stared at his tactical display in confusion. The human leader had put herself within range of every weapon in his fleet. She could be destroyed in seconds if he gave the order. Yet something about her presence made him hesitate. This was not how wars were supposed to end. Martinez broadcast a message to every ship in both fleets. Her voice was calm and dignified as she offered the Corvani one final chance to surrender with honor. She promised that all military personnel would be treated fairly, and that no harm would come to any civilian population anywhere in the Empire. The Supreme Admiral could not understand why the humans would show mercy to enemies who had tried to enslave them. His people had started this war with the intention of conquering Earth and scattering humanity across the galaxy as slaves. Now they were defeated, helpless, and completely at the mercy of their former victims. Cortez opened a private communication channel to Martinez and demanded to know why humans would spare those who had sought to destroy them. The president's answer would be remembered for centuries afterward. She told him that this was simply who humanity was. They had the strength to destroy, but chose the wisdom of restraint. The conversation continued for hours as Martinez explained humanity's true nature to the confused Corvani commander. Humans had developed their incredible military technology not for conquest but for protection. Their own brutal history had taught them the terrible cost of unchecked aggression. Earth had seen devastating wars that nearly destroyed the entire human species. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, and environmental destruction had brought humanity to the edge of extinction more than once. From those dark times, humans had learned that true strength meant knowing when not to use your power. When humans first reached the stars and met other intelligent races, they made a conscious decision to appear weak rather than strong. They had seen how the galaxy worked. Powerful empires conquered weaker ones, and the cycle of violence never ended. Humanity chose to break that cycle by hiding their true capabilities. Emperor Dalvin was brought aboard the New Geneva for a private meeting with Catherine Blake, the diplomat who had tried so hard to prevent this war. In the quiet conference room, Blake finally revealed the full truth about humanity's peaceful facade that had lasted for over 50 years. Every human colony had been built with hidden defenses. Every trade ship had carried concealed weapons. Every diplomatic mission had included intelligence gathering about alien military capabilities. The entire human race had been acting like peaceful sheep while secretly building the tools of apex predators. Blake explained that human military doctrine had always been based on demonstrating overwhelming power with minimal loss of life. Every battle in the recent war had been carefully planned to achieve maximum strategic impact while causing the least possible destruction. Even their most devastating weapons included built-in safeguards to prevent unnecessary casualties. General Jack Patterson revealed to Cortez that the human strategy had never been about conquest. From the very beginning, their plan had been to fight just long enough to prove their strength, then offer generous peace terms that would benefit everyone. They wanted to create a galaxy where disputes were settled through negotiation rather than warfare. Emperor Dalthan listened to these explanations with growing amazement and shame. His empire had started this war because they thought humans were weak and could be easily conquered. Instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant that could have destroyed them completely but chose not to. The peace negotiations took place in the ruins of the Imperial Palace on Corvana Prime. Martinez and Dal then worked together to create a new galactic charter that would protect the rights of all intelligent species. The other major alien powers who had been watching the war with growing terror eagerly agreed to sign the new accords. The most important part of the new charter was a mutual defense clause. Any species that attacked another would face the combined military might of all the signatories. Since everyone now knew what human weapons could do, this effectively meant that aggression would be met with overwhelming retaliation. Dal then signed the charter in his former throne room, which had been carefully repaired by human and Corvani engineers working together. As he put his signature on the document, he asked Martinez the question that haunted him most. How long had humanity been capable of such destruction? Martinez's answer was simple and devastating. Humanity had possessed these capabilities since before they reached the stars. For over 50 years, they had been strong enough to conquer the entire galaxy but had chosen instead to pretend weakness while hoping that peace could be maintained through other means. The war ended not with parades and celebrations, but with quiet ceremonies of remembrance for those who had died. Human medical ships worked alongside Corvani doctors to heal the wounded from both sides. Engineers from multiple species collaborated to repair the damage that the brief but devastating conflict had caused. Admiral Vextar, the Corvani commander who had started it all, spent his captivity aboard a human hospital ship. As he recovered from his wounds, he watched through a viewport as human and alien workers labored side by side. For the first time, he began to understand what Catherine Blake had meant when she spoke about mercy. The galaxy slowly adapted to its new reality. Trade resumed along routes that were now protected by human stealth ships. Diplomatic disputes were resolved through mediation rather than force. The threat of human intervention kept aggressive empires from starting new wars of conquest. Humanity returned to its policy of quiet strength, but everything had changed. The other species now knew that the peaceful traders and diplomatic negotiators were the same beings who could reshape the balance of galactic power overnight. Peace was no longer maintained by fear of mutual destruction, but by respect for those who chose restraint despite overwhelming capability. Dr. Rebecca Foster's weapons were carefully stored away, ready to be used again if necessary, but hopefully never needed. Admiral Yuki Tanaka's stealth fleets returned to their hidden bases among the asteroids and gas giants. The human military machine went back to sleep, but everyone knew it could wake up at any moment. Years later, as peace continued to hold across the galaxy, alien historians would study the brief war between humanity and the Corvani Empire. They called it the Last War because it taught the galaxy a lesson that no one would ever forget. True power was not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the wisdom to turn them into friends. Catherine Blake continued her work as a diplomat, but now she negotiated from a position of known strength rather than apparent weakness. When she entered a room, alien leaders listened carefully to her words because they understood the power that backed up her gentle voice. Peace through understanding had finally become reality. The story of humanity's hidden strength spread throughout the galaxy and became legend. Children of every species learned about the race that had been merciful all along, who had possessed the power to conquer the stars, but chose instead to share them. It was a lesson in restraint that would guide galactic civilization for generations to come. In the end, the galaxy learned that the most dangerous species was not the one with the biggest weapons or the largest fleets. The most dangerous species was the one that could destroy everything but chose not to. The one that preferred to be underestimated rather than feared. The one that showed mercy even to those who had tried to enslave them. That species was humanity, and they had been there all along.